Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, the world's a better place because you're in it. You see what happens when you subscribe? You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. On this episode, we talk to the one and only Michelle Sharfenberg. This is a phenomenal conversation. We spend about half of it talking about my favorite book, Influence by Robert Cialdini. And she talks about how she's able to pull those principles from the book into her program, into her interactions with different stakeholders in the organization. And she's a lot of fun, and I think you're really going to like it. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi.
What's happening?
Not much, living the dream.
Living the dream. Me too. That's great.
Awesome.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts. I've been pretty excited to get you on.
Yeah, me too. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Very good. So why don't we just dive right in? Why don't we talk a little bit about kind of how you got into this game?
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'm a lawyer by training, and I had been at a law firm and looking to move in-house. And this was back in the day when you had paper advertisements for jobs, in the legal intelligencer. So I saw an ad for a job that was a business attorney where they wanted the person to become an expert in fraud and abuse. And this was med device back in 2003. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. Sure. Not realizing that it was really when med device started taking off with compliance. So taking on that role really set me up to grow as compliance itself was growing.
So what was it about that role where you were like, yeah, I want to become an expert at that?
At the time, I didn't really know what it was. It was more, I loved med device. It was a chance to work with some business people in the field. I'd done some litigation around pharma and med device and the products liability arena in my career at that point. I was still pretty junior. I guess I just didn't realize how amazing it was going to be for my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Isn't that funny though? I mean, so many of us find ourselves in this industry. Like we didn't know about it growing up. We didn't know about it in college. And then we get into it and we're like, oh, this fits right. This is what I've been looking for.
What was it about?
What was it about? Like at one point you were in high school, like you went into law. What drew you into law?
So my mom was a legal secretary, and in fifth grade, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. But as I grew up, I started, I would challenge that periodically. And every time I would just come back to it. And I didn't, to the point earlier, I didn't know at the time. What I love about the law is it's highly analytical, but it's also very creative. So it kind of gets both sides of the brain going. And it's not that I like to argue, I like to persuade. So it was a great opportunity.
That's what all arguers say. That's what anybody who's argumentative says.
My son tries to argue with me and I'm like, don't try to lawyer a lawyer. Like I've been trained on this.
Exactly. So you don't like to argue, you like to persuade. And there's a lot of that kind of inherent to this field. Yes, there definitely is. And in fact, I grabbed a couple books to recommend during our podcast. Yeah.
And one of them is, I don't know if you're familiar with this
favorite book in the world. Yes.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, I just lent it to somebody literally a week ago.
Oh, get out.
I've lent out this book 100 times. I mean, I cannot get enough of this book. Have you read his other one called Persuasion?
No.
Okay, so go ahead. Book Michelle held up is Influence by Robert Cialdini. And his follow-up book was a book called Persuasion, which is it's equal. As good.
Okay. I'm going to have to pick that up because I do love this book and I love it. It's a marketing book.
Totally.
And yet I feel like everyone should read it, particularly anyone in legal compliance, HR, because it really is all about how we are persuaded, how we're even manipulated. So it can help you avoid that. So why do you love it so much? Same reason or?
So I am a big persuading guy. I argue everything. I love to argue. I love debate, just in general. I love to kind of press on people's positions and, I just love that whole thing. And I growing up, I grew up in a sales family. And so I was always selling stuff. I'd go to like Sam's Club or Costco or something and get like a big box of like blow pops and sell those on the bus and always selling stuff door to door and things like that. And as I got older, I grew up in the sales family. I sold stuff in college, all that. But I was, training to be an accountant in finance. Like that's what I was studying. And when I got into accounting, I worked at KPMG out of school. And what I realized was like all these partners they're in sales roles. Obviously at that level, you're like have to bring in business. Yes. And I just saw them like they sucked at selling. Like they sucked at it. Like they were so bad. And there was like one or two guys that I thought like really got it. They were great. They were great accountants and they were great salespeople as well. And they were top of the class. You know what I'm saying? Like they brought in, disproportionately way more, revenue for the firm. And then you see these other guys who are phenomenal accountants. Like you can give them any problem. They know the answer. They know the code, all that kind of stuff. But man, they just had no like traction in, they had no traction in like, resonating with the client. Like they would end up doing a ton of extra work that would have no value because they didn't frame it right to the client or things like that. Right. So that really kind of underscored to me that like this persuasion thing, it's not, everybody doesn't have it. And like, it's super critical. And so as my career progressed, I really I kind of had this light bulb moment at some point where I was like, this is actually all sales. Like everything is all sales. We're all just selling and persuading. And I have to get you to buy into my idea to get you to, in order for you to like voluntarily participate in whatever, actions are required for that idea. I have to like convince you to do that. And, when my brother and I, took over this company, that was like underscored big time. It's like, I can't walk around with a bullhorn or like a cattle prod to get people to do stuff. Like you have to persuade them. You have to, and I think the core of persuasion, it's all influence to me. It's all persuasion, whether you're in sales or you're in leadership or you're a CEO or something like that. And then as I got into this industry, I was just like, everything we're talking about is all persuasion. Like the entire job is influence because we're trying to influence behaviors and we can't compel someone. We can't force someone to do those things. And then as I got deeper into the industry, I, saw that like, this persuasion is not just to those stakeholders on the front lines. We have to be persuading our counterparts in other departments, and we have to be persuading leadership. And what I've seen over and over again, I've been in this industry now for over a decade. It is like the most important skill, I think, regardless of industry. And I think it's a skill that like we have a lot of opportunity to like develop further because like we have all these foundational elements in place, and now it's just about kind of, catalyzing it better or like tweaking it a little bit, tweaking the way that we show up to really unlock a lot of value.
That's exactly it. I had a GC for 15 years, Rich Gorlick, and he taught me so much. And one of the things he would say is, we're always selling something, and you're absolutely right. For a hot minute early in my career, when I first became a chief compliance officer, I tried authority and that failed miserably. And so I've had a lot of people tell me over my career, well, you have a lot of authority. Yes. And you get to use it once, and it's exactly. Usually on the way out the door. The reality is the world of ethics and compliance is about human behavior. It's about mindset and values and all of this stuff. You cannot coerce that at all. Right. The best you can do is influence it by tapping into who people want to be, who they view themselves as, and how acting in a certain way or thinking in a certain way really gets them to being the person that they ideally see themselves as.
Yeah, because we all have these like splinters or these fractures of different personalities inside of us, or like, I'm not saying everybody's like schizophrenic, although we might be. But like, to the extent I say, all right, I'm getting up tomorrow morning and I'm going to like hit the gym. And then the next morning I don't hit the gym. Well, those are like almost two different people, right? Like one person made a decision to like do something. And then the other person is like, I'm just going to hit the snooze. I'm going to start tomorrow. And, I think when we can recognize that and we can recognize that that exists in our entire stakeholder group, right? Like there's still that like young, that young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, guy inside of me. And then there's also the jaded guy who's had bad experiences and stuff like that. And those people show up in different ways. And I think to your point, when we can recognize that, and recognize that like we need to resonate with some image that somebody has of themselves or something that they hold important. When we can resonate with that, the odds of them acting or like showing up as that personality inside them that we want them to is like just so much higher, you know?
It absolutely is. And then that drives social norms, which I think is the most effective way to drive an ethical culture. And getting back to when I was a child in high school, my mom, legal secretary, that's what they were called at the time, I was asking her advice because I had the option of debate or acting as an elective. And she said, take acting. It's going to help you so much more in your career. And she was 100% correct. I wound up studying acting in high school and college. And the biggest lesson I found is it is all about the audience. You know, we are so focused on ourselves.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's about the people we are trying to influence, the ones we're working with, the ones who are out there, the salespeople, all of those folks. And so we have to step away from our own agendas, our own thinking. And when I say put ourselves into their shoes, I don't mean pretend like we are acting in their environment, but to truly understand their world and therefore be able, to your point, to have them show up in that way that they maybe don't realize they want to show up in, but certainly is to their benefit.
You know, what you said, I think is so right. Like, you can't persuade anybody unless you can resonate with them, and you can't resonate with them unless you understand how they look at the world. You understand their world to your exact point. And, man, I love what you just said. We can spend a whole hour on what you just said, but it is all about the audience. Like if I cooked a great dish and you hate it, well, guess what? The dish stunk. You know what I'm saying? Like if I put together a great song, but no one likes it, well, then the song stinks. I mean, I might like it, but if you translate that into our program, it only matters if it works. You know what I'm saying? Like it's only good if it's working. It's only good if it's changing the behaviors. Regardless of how well you know the statute or how well you know the policy, you know, how many times you've rewritten the policy or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. And that's when I think of some of my successes and failures, that's a big piece of it is, did it really translate to people understanding, caring about it? You know, because at the end of the day, if it didn't, it's irrelevant. That's why I don't like legalese in policies, because even though, you always have that kind of key stakeholder that is the government out there, but they're not your primary audience. And at the end of the day, you're better off preventing issues because people understand than having you need both, but then having a defensible, great policy that, people, the government's going to love. You need both, but you can't lose sight that your primary audience are the people you're trying to influence.
Yeah. Who's the audience? So going back to the book, Influence, what did you love about it? Why is that the first one you held up?
It has had such a profound effect in my life. First of all, personally, right? You read it and then you start realizing all the ways society is trying to influence and even manipulate you, right?
Yeah. And then you're like looking down at your clothes and you're like, oh, that's why I bought that.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And in the world of medical device and pharmaceuticals, we have a lot of restrictions on things like gifts and meals. And there's just a lot that doesn't translate into other industries and can get very confusing for folks, especially if they didn't grow up in the industry, right? So we can't give away pens. I mean, that's just unusual to most people. They're like, you can't even give away a pen. That's stupid. And, you can debate the standard and always a fun debate to have, always a fun conversation. When you read the book, though, it talks about how de minimis items, little ways that you give reciprocity, right? And so you start to realize, wait a minute, there is some sense to some of these requirements. So when I'm talking to salespeople and saying, you can't give away a pen, and they're balking, I'm like, read the book. You'll actually understand why we are more influenced than we realize, because it's all on the subconscious level. Yeah. It's not like if someone asked you, did that pen get you to do the business? Of course they'd say no. but you don't realize what's happening on your subconscious level. And so I love psychology generally, and this is the psychology of persuasion. So that's the kind of stuff that resonated in the book for me. How about you?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it just underscored to me, I believe this with my whole heart, that like any lock, like the right locksmith, the right lock picker can pick any lock. There's no lock that they can't pick. And I just think that's the same for people. Like, assuming you're not trying to hoodwink them or like take advantage of them, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, let's kind of stay in the noble side of the fence. There's always a way. There just always is. There's always a way to put it in terms that resonate with them. There's just always a way to pick the lock. Yeah. And so that to me is like an extremely freeing, like there's so much freedom in that. And it's all kind of on you. There's like a lot of agency in that kind of a vision, or that kind of a perspective. So I like that. And I just think there's so many tactics in that book. There's so many I love how he broke down like how we're persuaded, or which of these sort of axioms drive, whether it's reciprocity or liking. And I think there's like maybe 6 or 7 in the book. But I just think it's such a good reminder, because to your point, we're all selling something. Everybody's in sales, whether they are getting commission or not. Okay. And it's such a good, there's just so many good tactics of like different things that we can employ. Or for me, it really made a lot of connections between like, the payoff that people get for doing certain things. So like when someone comes to your house with a casserole when you move into a neighborhood, well, what does that do? Well, that ingratiates, that they've ingratiated themselves to you. That started to build a relationship. But the base of it is that reciprocity. They're coming in, they're giving you a gift. And I think it's a really strong glimpse into like a lot of these cognitive errors or these cognitive biases that we have, and how, they can be, maybe this sounds Machiavellian, but like how they can be taken advantage of, within the organization, and I just think, I think there's a lot in there. I mean, there's so much psychology, like that study, like I love that study in the book where they were trying to get people to like reuse towels, and how they just changed the phraseology a little bit to say, please use your towel. No one reused it. And then they said like 85% of people who stayed in this room for more than one night reused their towel. And then they saw that's totally skyrocket. Right. So like we've integrated that into our, that kind of approach. We've integrated that into our invoicing. Please join the 85% of clients who pay within the first 30 days. Like there's 1,000 applications for it. Please join the 85% of your colleagues who complete their compliance training on time. Like there's ways that we can frame things. There's ways that we can say things that can like give some tailwinds to the recognition of like the social norms we're trying to create. I think many times in persuasion, sorry, I'm rambling so much, but like many times in persuasion or these kinds of things, we ostensibly are sitting in the passenger seat and we're just throwing something out there and we're just like, fingers crossed, hope this lands. But like we are an active participant in the system. We are, we participate in the engagement, and we, in some level, have the ability to influence that level of engagement. But it takes us being smart and trying different things and A/B testing things and trying to employ these principles of persuasion if we're going to drive more impact, I think.
That's exactly it, Nick. And to that point, first of all, I do love the research in that book. I love behavioral science research. I think it helps a lot in my job. If I had the time, I'd get a master's in that. And, kind of to that point, when you understand how people think, you start to realize, okay, so now that I know this is what motivates this person. So this is how I'm going to approach them. At the end of the day, one of the things I love about this field and what keeps me in it, despite the challenges and frustrations, is I find ethics and compliance is beyond just legal. Totally. It's intellectual, it's psychological, it's spiritual, it's metaphysical, it's all of these things. Because
it's artistic, it's creative, it's all that.
Yes. Yeah. Most people want to do something bigger than just get a paycheck. Most people want to know that they're having a larger mark on the world. And so you're right, when you start putting out these statements to folks, the 85%, then they start to realize, wait a minute, it's not just me making a mark, it's others, so I can be a part of a larger effort. to do good, right? And then you start to incorporate that kind of stuff, particularly into training, education, communication, I find is the most effective way to do that in a compliance program. You can have it in policies, but those are usually more statements. And so then people start to get excited about it, which is always shocking when you start to see people get excited about compliance, and they'll say to me, I never thought compliance could be fun. I never saw these connections. This is exciting. Yeah.
Well, everyone thinks it's this one thing, and they think it's this one-dimensional or two-dimensional thing, where there is so much dimensionality, to your point, in what we do. And there's really so many, because it's so, there's so much dimension to ethics and compliance. There's really a tremendous opportunity to resonate with everybody, frankly, because there's something everybody, we can hook into everybody, right? Whether it's a culture of integrity, or whether it's quality, or whether it's just excellence, or whether it's, this is the way things should be done. I mean, people do things for that reason as well, right? Like, we're all motivated by, some different things, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's why it's important to understand the motivation people have, back to the audience, right? Because there are some people that are only motivated by money or power. Guess what? There's a story there too. I'll tell you the business case for why, the company will make more money, and therefore you will make more money if it's a compliant organization. Now leaders are expected to have these understandings and drive these cultures. So, if you want to be at a CEO at a huge, powerful company, this needs to be central. There's always a story to help people adopt what you need them to adopt.
And, back to the book, I mean, you said story 5 times just now. Like, if we don't do enough storytelling, stories are very persuasive. There's a lot of information you can pack into a parable or an analogy or a story. And you're talking to another human being who's just going to make those connections. And, speaking of connections, I just think I love this field because there's so much opportunity in it. It's not something that I think everybody in ethics and compliance has a black belt in. Let's just say legal, we have a black belt in that. Writing policies, we have a black belt in that. I don't think that industry-wide, sales has a black belt in persuasion, right? That's what they do. I think as we progress toward that black belt, there's just so much, it just opens up so much opportunity. Like, another principle in that book is this principle of anchoring. I think as you start to feed your mind this stuff, you start to see opportunities to employ anchoring in a strategic way to get more of what you need. So if you're asking for $100,000 from the board for a budget increase, you can say, I know I asked for 20K last year, but I need 100 this year. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to be asking for about 5 million 3 or 4 years from now. If things go well, don't fall out of your chairs. I only need 100 this year. Those two sound very different. Okay. Those sound very different. Okay.
That's exactly it. And, if a company has ever been in the situation where they've done, for instance, a DOJ investigation, an OIG or any other government investigation, sometimes you get the chance to show them, hey, yeah, I know we spent, $1 million on this, but we were looking at 100 million. So look how great that is. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the 100 now, or the million, doesn't sound that big anymore. Right. Exactly.
So what other books did you bring?
So actually I have another one, and it's to your point about, this notion that, compliance is really a newer area. But before I get there, the stories, I didn't think about this one. The Heath brothers, this is long. It was a little bit longer ago, but do you know the Heath brothers? They did Made to Stick, and I'm blanking on the other book, but Made to Stick is wonderful. And it has the acronym SUCCESS without the final S. And they're the points to make your ideas sticky.
Okay, I read this. Yeah.
Okay, yes. And stories is one of them. Sudden, unexpected. It's why I incorporate music.
Yeah.
What's that?
The pattern interrupt is wildly powerful, to your point. They're not expecting music. Right.
Yes. I walk in as a compliance officer at a sales meeting and I start playing music, and they're automatically like, who is this person?
What is this? I got to tune into this and figure this out. Right.
Yes, that's exactly it. So that book, and it looks at why is it that urban legends stick, but the CDC's efforts on emergency preparedness don't. So it's again, study-based, research-based. The other book I wanted to talk about really gets to the fact that we as compliance officers are fairly new. I mean, compliance officers have been around for a bit, but this
is by no means the oldest profession. You know what I mean?
No. Yes, it's fair that it's the newest. Exactly. And, you and I before were talking about the difference between quality, regulatory, compliance. Quality and regulatory have been established, and people have been doing business, since people were interacting, right?
Yeah, right.
And so everyone has this kind of mindset on why business is done a certain way and how business is done. And then compliance officers come in and they're trying to really shake it up and say, no, we have to think about business differently. So this book is Why They Do It, Inside the Mind of a White Collar Criminal by Eugene Soltz.
Cool.
Have you heard of it?
I have not read it. I think I've seen the cover before, but I don't know anything about the book.
It's a great book. Now, I will tell you 2/3 of it is research. So it's a very thick book. So for some folks, I say just skip to part 3 because that's where all the stories are. But the research does go into the fact that white collar crime is a fairly new concept. You think about, for instance, the FCPA or the anti-kickback statute. Those are only from the 70s, and they really didn't start getting enforced until, a little bit in the 80s and 90s. But really the last 25 years is when we've seen a lot more effort. And that's when we as compliance officers have really been building out our field. So if you think about it, a profession that, is 1 or 2 generations old compared to all of our counterparts in a company where their professions are
thousands of years old, maybe.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It gives a lot of insight into the fact that people just haven't really thought the way that compliance now expects, because 60s, bribery was pretty typical. So how do you get folks who have been entrenched for as long as business has been to realize that the environment is very, very different? And that's beyond politics. That's beyond a particular political leader or things like that, because I know there's a lot right now about FCPA and that being put on hold. Great opportunity to talk about the statute of limitations and the fact that the government has a long memory. And so, we sometimes think, we're going to go back to the way business had always been done. We're not. We're never.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So I do recommend that book. If for nothing else, the story's in it. There's this great story about a pharma startup that had clinical results and they were not clear. And the CEO talks about how if it was clearly bad results, they would have pulled the product. If it were clearly good, obviously they'd market it. But the data was in between. And so it was a gray area and he made the wrong choice and wound up in jail. So things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you kind of said something before that I want to go back to. You said that, FCPA is kind of new. Compliance is kind of new, and people have been doing business for like a really long time. And now we're coming in and we're telling them you have to do business in a different way. But I think I don't know how to say this, the different way is the right way. And taking bribes before was also wrong. And I feel like people who are doing that, they knew in their heart that it was wrong. The creation of a rule doesn't necessarily make something wrong or right. If it was, do you know what I'm saying? We all have a conscience or something.
That's the difference between ethics and compliance, right? Ethics is about what is right beyond the rules, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And for some, that's a morality concept. For some, that's a societal concept. For some, that's a spiritual concept. But that's what it comes down to. And the fact that there's no rule against it doesn't make it okay. And what I find most interesting in the bribery world is, the countries where bribery is so rampant are also the underdeveloped countries. And so again, with the business impact, corruption does not help anyone. It helps the particular people in power in that moment until there's a coup or until, they die, because everyone dies at some point. And so there's the fact that people do bribes doesn't make it okay and does not help the world at all either.
Yeah, there's a certain short-termism to your point that allows for that to happen,
Yes, it's a short-term play. It always is. Your bribe is only as good as the next person who comes along with a better bribe, which is why particularly I've lived in small to mid-sized companies. It's a terrible idea because there's always a larger company who can bribe better,
Right. Deeper pockets.
So I say we are better off with these requirements. Let me be clear.
Yeah. So in the book, like, what else did it say as like the drivers behind why they did it? So maybe that was a lapse in judgment for that pharma CEO you talked about. Did it kind of make the case that like it's just kind of at the it's kind of like marginal decisions in the moment that are a little bit off track, that again, like if two lines are not parallel, then at some point they're like miles apart. You know what I mean?
Yes, that is a big piece of it, is that idea that that in the moment you're just making this decision and it seems like a good idea at the time, and then later on you're now farther and farther. It also talks about who you listen to, having the right consigliere, if you will. I've always loved, I had a business person call the lawyers his consigliere, but legal, let's just be clear. But who are you listening to? Who are the folks who have your ear so that you're being guided by the right people, particularly CEOs and other leaders, to make sure the importance of really contemplating the long-term impact of a decision versus just that short-term win. And there's a lot in there about that. And like I said, it also goes into the research about how and why we have the compliance structures we have these days, which is really helpful when you're out trying to talk to folks about, trying to influence them. It gives you some good information for the people who love data, because there are data people out there. Just give me the data. So that's going to provide you with the data as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting field that we're in, because of the complexity and because of the dimensionality that we talked about. But also it's interesting because it's like so hard, I mean, you have all these stakeholders that you're trying to get to do the right thing. And each of those stakeholders is like what I call a rationalization machine. Like we as humans can rationalize anything, and the person who's, got the tubes in their nose at the end of their life because they have, lung cancer and emphysema. There was some point where they weren't a smoker, and there was some point where they smoked that first cigarette. And then there was some point where they're smoking a pack a day. You know what I'm saying? Like that progression can happen. And each step along the way, we have this like unique ability to both like know what's right and wrong, but also this unique ability to like rationalize away what's wrong and frame it in our mind to like justify it,
100%. And actually, that reminds me of the fraud triangle in the fraud world, but I call it the why good people do bad things triangle. And to me, the biggest one really is rationalization. It's amazing how we can lie to ourselves, really. Right. And it doesn't, fraud, no one walks in, like you said, no one like wakes up in the morning and they want to go to the gym and they decide, no, I'm just going to commit fraud instead.
Yeah.
Right?
Today's a good day for fraud. Yeah.
It's a series of little decisions over time and the rationalizations that go with those decisions that, to your point, go from here to here. And so, not just, we can't do it individually. We have to build societal norms. We have to connect with one another, whether it be other compliance folks in the industry, which I love. So this is a lot of fun. Also, people within our companies, anyone within our sphere of influence, to increase that influence, to constantly remind people, I know this decision seems like a good idea now, but that crystal ball, this is where it actually leads to. And it's, to me, the crystal ball is really just wisdom. It's taking in information about trends, about laws, about ethics, taking in the business perspective, putting it it all together and being able to see where that takes you in your path.
Yeah. And convey it in a compelling way for other people to be like, oh, this is where this is going. That's kind of the key.
Yeah. Which is sometimes the hardest, honestly, is actually because I can see it, but I can't necessarily express it. Yeah.
And then you also have that other like Upton Sinclair dynamic in the mix where like, I forget the quote, I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, it's impossible for a person to understand something if their salary depends on them not understanding it.
Yes.
So there's that, that's also out there, that's also something we have to kind of navigate through. But as you've gotten deeper into persuasion, or as that light bulb is turned on, maybe it's always been on for you. Do you feel like you look at everything through that lens now?
Yes. And it hasn't always been on. In fact, it was quite a shift going from lawyer to compliance officer. So, I had been a lawyer for a long time. So, and while being a lawyer helps a lot, you have to get past that pure kind of legal analysis. I can make an argument for anything. Like you give me anything, I can make a valid argument. Doesn't mean it's a good idea. And so you have to get past that to seeing the world differently. And you can't, Rich, the guy I was talking about, would say you don't always win by being right all the time. And as a lawyer, I wanted to be right. So it took me a while to switch to that influence versus authority. And now it's true. I got to tell you, it has helped me with parenting in ways I never imagined, because I was well into compliance before I had a child. And so using it with my son, teaching my son how to use it, he's in middle school with other kids, it just becomes how you live. And if, to your point of staying on the side of noble, if you're trying to do it for good, where I think it takes you is really being out of yourself and just generous and selfless, trying to drive what others need, not always what they want. So it becomes a whole lifestyle.
Yeah, it does. It's like it's like a posture, but to your point, I think like when you're living in that kind of a frame, or I guess in order to live in that frame, it causes you to like more consistently put yourself in other people's shoes. Like you're just always in the audience's shoes.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean, I think tough love is an important concept. I think it's important to remember you're driving toward what they need, not what they want.
Yes. Correct.
Because sometimes sometimes you're so in their shoes that it's tempting to say, well, then I want to approve this sale, except that's not going to be good for them.
Right.
This is, helping them understand that this is the direction to go, is what is healthy for them. So now that I understand their struggles and aspirations, I can help lead them to that.
So how have you helped to push that down to other people on your team? This mentality, is it explicit? Is it implicit? Is it you just show up in a certain way and you just kind of provide some commentary on what you're trying to, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you get more people kind of singing the same song?
Yeah, it's all of the above. Because again, it's back to what works for that particular person. So I believe that we as leaders are called to, I'm big into servant leadership. We're called to understand our people, see their motivations, help them to realize their greatest ideal for themselves, again, who they need to be, not necessarily what they want. And then through that, you're influencing them and teaching them influence at the same time. So it could be as simple as recommending the book and then going back and saying, okay, so let's talk about the book. What did you find? Following up and saying, okay, in this situation, how did you use influence? Or how did it go wrong because we didn't necessarily influence? Things like that, having those conversations, the normal coaching. I think, though, as a leader, your best approach is to lead by example. So when you come in and model it, then other people start to pick up on things. Like that boss of mine for 15 years, he modeled a lot. And so even now, having worked for him for several years, even now I look at some of the things I do and I go, oh yeah, that was him,
But those things you do that you got from him were because you saw those things working.
I did.
Like, that's the best way to get buy-in.
Yes.
We have a team of sales development reps who are trying to drive business for our organization. And like historically in the sales game, sales development reps, they send out these mass emails to folks. And like, I don't really think that works. When I get in a mass email from like someone trying to sell me something, I just delete it because I don't know. I think you can see it,
Yeah.
And so we have a handful of people on our SDR team who kind of go the other way with it. And it's deeply researched. They're reaching out human to human. I just think like, it's not time for everybody to buy something from our company. Fine. But like the odds of them even engaging are going to be, in my mind, exponentially higher if it's like a one-to-one message versus me just scattering seed on the soil. You know what I'm saying? But to bring this home, I can be saying that 1,000 times, but the adoption of that human to human approach really has been driven by other people seeing those who are doing that approach succeeding. Like those are all the top performers. You know what I'm saying? So like all these other people are like, what are they doing? Oh, they're doing that thing that Nick's been talking about. I should start doing it. So to your point, it's like modeling it and seeing like it's seeing that it works ends up driving like more like authentic compliance than something that's put down by mandate or edict,
It is very true. And that's true for your clients as well. Yep. How do you get them to listen to you? Well, just be consistent and show them how this is the path that's going to take them to where they need to go versus otherwise. I mean, there was a whole situation in our industry related to physician-owned distributorships. And it was huge and it was problematic. And AdvaMed, our trade association, was trying to deal with it. It was slow in getting the government to react to it. But basically, you had physicians who were setting up distributorships and trying to have companies sell product through them for their surgeries. Now, there are structures that are perfectly fine, but then there are structures that
there's
really
a little
aren't.
moral hazard in that in some ways.
Yeah, bit. Yeah. And so, just through that, reminding the company, look, I know the government hasn't done anything yet, but they will. They will. And so these are the reasons for the moral hazard. And this is what we'll consider acceptable. If we see this model, it's what we'll consider unacceptable. So I'm not saying no to everything. I'm saying this is the direction. Well, guess what? Finally, years later, there was a fraud alert that came out and the government started going after the physicians and the distributorships. And now it's not the issue it was. It's still out there. Well, then the next time there's an issue, I can remind folks, okay, you know what? Remember last time and we did it this way and we avoided the problems, to your point about the anchoring. So we saved $100 million. So how about we invest $1 million here? It builds that credibility to say, okay, so maybe there's something to this whole compliance thing.
You know how like a DJ is like, if you're a DJ, you're never going to like run out of like music to use. Like there's always something you can grab and mix in there and like come up with something new. And like the same thing is true for influence and persuasion. There's always something you can grab. There's a story externally. There's something in the history of your company. There's a conversation you had. You can always be pulling from these things to really frame out better in a more compelling way, the conclusion that you want them to arrive at. I got an idea. I came up with this idea a couple nights ago. I was walking my dog and don't steal this now. I'm just kidding. You can steal it. Imagine a series of videos, like a series of like TikTok style videos from the compliance department that are sent out across the organization that are really talking about like the behind the scenes, the like how the sausage is made and really framing out compliance and ethics as like, we are the behavioral science experts in the organization. And here's how we try to use behavioral science to drive your behavior. We want to drive it. We want to build an organization that has an authentic, this is kind of the commentary for the video. We're trying to build an organization that has an authentic, culture of integrity, which requires everybody believing that and everybody acting in that way. And so we as ethics and compliance, as behavioral science experts, and pause, this is like a way to, everyone loves psychology, pop psychology, behavioral science. Like it's interesting to all of us. Like, how can we bring this thing that we should be using to like do our job and like display it or like, you know what I'm saying? Like
I love that idea. And
so here's how we use anchoring. Anchoring is this concept and this does blah, blah, blah. And here's how we use anchoring to try to drive your behavior. Or we're trying to, I don't know, like there's so many behavior, here's how we use nudges to try to get you to use the speak up line. Or this is what we've built into the speak up line so that you can feel, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I watch so many, like how they made that movie videos or like how they made that dish. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to see how the cook did it. And I just think there's something human in us that we want to see that stuff. And like the psychology piece, the behavioral science piece, I think it resonates with a lot of human beings. Why not reframe us by like displaying that and displaying how we're putting those principles into practice? I think it would reframe compliance in a tremendous way.
I agree. I think that's a brilliant idea. I won't steal it from you.
No, please do. Please do. I'll steal it back. I'll take your videos and steal them back. Yeah.
What you could do is, for compliance officers, like this would be fun to do, is give them a kit for them to be able to do stuff like that, right?
Great. Yeah.
And so the other thing it does is by doing the behind the scenes, one of the reasons why we're so attracted to it is because it takes the mystery out, right? And it makes you feel like you're in, like you're,
you can kind of see how it works. Like, yeah, yes. I kind of know some, there's some Gnosticism in it or something, it's like, I know something that I shouldn't know or something.
Right, that's exactly it. I'm in the know.
Yeah.
And we as compliance officers are constantly trying to humanize compliance, right? And it's really easy if you have like an acting background or I remember your very first podcast. I forget who was on that podcast,
Christy,
but she was talking about it, the theater background, and I loved it. It's easier when you do that, but it is something that any compliance officer can do because all you're doing is letting your hair down. Some just may need the structure.
You're just being more yourself. Yeah.
Yes. And that's who we want to see. That's who employees want to see. If they're coming to you with a deeply unsettling issue, you think about situations, especially if it's like in the quality regulatory world where they don't usually interact at all with compliance. But even in commercial, they have a deeply unsettling issue, something that's been bothering them for a very long time.
Yeah.
And they don't feel like
they're not talking to you on day one.
Right. No. And that's its own issue because by the time they come to you, they want it to be fixed immediately. And you're sitting there going, okay.
I just found out about this. Give me a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you got to walk with them to help them relieve their sometimes years of anxiety. But I think this helps make you human and approachable, your idea, so that folks then, that one of the whistleblowers, several, but one in particular that I had, it was simply because I built a relationship doing some fun, crazy stuff that got someone to recommend to someone else to come talk to me. And I think your idea is a brilliant one. So if you could create a toolkit for compliance officers to then adopt to help them, if you need a little help with like a few acting lessons too, I could help you on that. Right. But that would be a lot of fun. Actually, you're quite skilled at it. So, but to help them do that, I think that's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. It's going to take us doing some things a little bit different. And I think doing things a little bit different can really have a tremendous impact.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you like the idea. I love the idea of turning it into a behavioral science kit.
Yeah.
It's just it's a very cool it's a cool place that we're at right now. It's a really cool place.
It is. It's a lot of fun. It's a little scary because there's a lot more pressure now. And the hard part, I think, as well for companies is if they've been in a government situation and they're exiting, normalizing those behaviors and not undoing all the good work and realizing this is just business. And that's why culture is so critical, because it's at the end of the day, how your heart beats is how you live, right? And so a company's heartbeat needs to beat with ethics to live long term.
Wow, what a way to end this thing. That was phenomenal. Wow. Yeah, that's true. That's exactly true. Yeah, it needs to beat. How did you say it? For it to live long term, it needs to be.
It needs to beat. I forget exactly what I said, but it's got to be.
We're going to watch the replay because that was good.
Okay.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. This was really, really phenomenal. I'm gonna feature that book on some webinars because it's a great reminder of this conversation was a great reminder of how great that book is and how impactful it can be for us. Michelle, where can people find you, or where can they reach out to you if they have questions or they want some acting lessons or something?
I would love to hear from folks. I love having these dialogues. So you can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm Michelle Sharfenberg. So there aren't a lot of us. I'm pretty easy to find and would love to have a conversation if anyone wants to chat or even, need some help or whatever. This is definitely my passion.
I love it. Well, Michelle, thanks so much for coming on. This was really a lot of fun, and we will see you soon.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.